Hi there. Welcome to Game of Her Own, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. I bring you stories of women who are game changers, incredible leaders, and trailblazers in the sports industry. You will get a behind-the-scenes look of how they navigated their journey, valuable lessons they learned along the way, and advice for high-achieving women just like you. I'm excited you're here. Let's do this. Yvonne is back. It is time for part 2 of turning self-doubt into confidence. If you haven't heard part 1, I encourage you to go back and listen. In part 2 of our conversation, Yvonne shares how she created a position for herself that did not exist at Wasserman. She talks about negotiating, salary, title, and all the things that come along with being offered a position that she created herself. Let's jump back in. Hope you enjoy. You are very, very strategic in your networking. You are making relationships, nurturing those relationships, and then you were really selective because you were thinking about your long-term move. You were getting your job that you had at the time. You were getting it done and you were doing it well, but you were also thinking about what's next and what's my long-term goal. And it sounds to me you're in that position now. Is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. So once I identified this long-term goal, which is to be on the player representation side, and I could basically sum up my role as a player manager. I support the agent and I predominantly focus on off-the-field efforts, marketing, PR, philanthropy, social media management, digital content. And of course I have a team of people at my disposal via Wasserman, which is a worldwide sports agency. So for the digital content, I'm not physically editing videos. I have colleagues who help me with that, et cetera. But I want to go back really quick in terms of the networking and the right people will notice point that I brought. I cultivated these relationships with various agents. There was a point in time that, I had thrown it out to Nez, like, hey, if there's anything, at CAA, I would be very interested in knowing about it, et cetera. But what had developed is that I had done or started to collaborate so closely with the Wasserman baseball clients on the Dodgers that naturally I had more of a regular conversations and contact with the Wasserman agents. I finally sort of pitched the idea of this job that didn't exist.
Yes, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So I remember having a conversation with Andy Moda, who's not only a great colleague, but a dear friend. I've been friends with the Moda family. This is important too. And I mentioned him, in a pre-conversation that Latinos in baseball, I feel have had the most impact in my career. And the Moda family, particularly throughout my career at the Dodgers, had always just been so supportive. Jose at the Angels, obviously Manny at the Dodgers. And through Jose, I believe I met Andy, his brother, who's an agent at Wasserman. So having conversations with Andy and saying, hey, look, like I can do PR, I can do marketing. Obviously, I communicate in Spanish. You guys have a lot of Latino players. I would love to have a role with Wasserman that involves all this skill set that I had been working on for that amount of time. So I envisioned this player relations role. That's what I called it. And that's what it's called. So it's player relations, right? And Andy said, this is interesting. I can definitely use your help. Let's talk about it more. Let's think about it more. And so we started to have conversations probably around the summertime. And as luck would have it, one of the former Dodgers was in town playing an interleague game, Hanley Ramirez of the Red Sox. And Hanley is a Wasserman client. So I connected with Hanley. Jahaan, when I say that I have just maximized networking opportunities, I mentioned to Hanley, I'm like, Hanley, it's so nice to see you. And he said all these kind of things. He's like, hey, you know what? I never thanked you for looking out for me when I was the Dodgers. And I just want to say thank you for looking out for me, like looking out for the Latino guys. Like it means a lot more than you think. So we had this heartwarming conversation, hugged on the field. And in that process, I said, you know what, Hanley? I wanted to mention to you that I've been talking to your agent, Andy and Adam Katz, and, I really want to work for Wasserman. I'm like, I want to do some work for you. And he's like, okay, all right. So thinking that maybe he'll mention it. I don't know if he did, maybe he didn't. But again, just kind of leveraging like all my connections and saying like, how can I make a better case for myself to get this job that I want, this player relations role? So I'm telling Hanley, like, I want to work for you directly. Anyway, so that's around the summertime. We paused discussions before the postseason because, Adam and Andy felt like, okay, let's pause, have you focus on your postseason, and let's revisit this. Let me think it through. We have to kind of dot the I's, cross the T's within the agency and see what this role could be or look like. But they were on board after several conversations of me pitching myself as this player relations director. So I went through the postseason again with that confidence, with that, the joy of knowing that like, I'm going to make this job mine. It doesn't exist. I've been given every indication that it's possible. So knowing that it's possible, I am going to make this happen. I'm going to make it happen. This is my job. This is what I'm going to do. I have this little internal pep talk. I'm talking to my sister, telling her these conversations are happening. And I tell my sister confidently, I'm like, this is my last postseason as a PR person. And I'm going to enjoy it. And it's going to be great. But this is it. Like, I had declared like that this was it, right?
Yep.
Anyway, fast forward to, I would say, end of year, November, December, it started to fully come into fruition as a formal role that got the sign off for the baseball group at Wasserman to hire. So the rest of the time, there was a little bit of back and forth, as you can imagine. Again, goes back to this journey, this entire journey and everything happening for a reason. And at that point, I had never been as confident in myself, like even more so than when that door opened at the Dodgers. And so these negotiations, they took a little while because Jahaan, I knew the title I wanted, I knew the salary I wanted, and there was very little room for negotiation. And I was confident they need me. I'm going to exceed expectations for this job. And since in my head, I'm thinking, look, I'm 5 years late to this in my head because having determined I should have left the Dodgers years ago, I'm like, I got to make up for lost time. I got to maximize the title. I got to set this up well for myself because we're talking about the next few years in my career. Mm-hmm. And this has to be my prime, right? I have to set it up so this is my prime. So it did take a little while.
That's amazing. Wait, will you talk a little bit at a high level? Because this is incredible, right? So here you go from self-doubt and have had an amazing career so far, but your self-doubt, you go from self-doubt to creating your own role at a new company. So you went down that path and now you're negotiating. You're not just accepting whatever they give to you because you're like, I'm grateful I got a job in sports, the job I wanted. No, you are demanding your value. What tips can you give in terms of that negotiation time in your life? Like that had to be really intense. What tips can you give?
First of all, I'm glad that you mentioned this because I think it's important that we sort of take a moment to talk about the sooner that you can turn the page on the grateful to be here attitude, when you've earned and when you have the confidence that you've earned your spot, you've put in your years or your time and you've honed your skill set. You need to turn the page on the grateful to be here attitude. I will say that the grateful to be here attitude probably semi-hindered my progress, like I said, in terms of moving on from the Dodgers. The sooner you have an understanding of you belong there and you can feel that with confidence, please, by all means, turn the page on that because I feel like women in sports, we sort of hang on to that for longer than we need to. Gosh, I forgot your question.
Yeah.
Oh, some negotiating tips.
Yes.
Okay, so again, doing as much research as I possibly could in terms of similar jobs, having an understanding of what the sports agency structure and how that works and how much work would possibly come my way, knowing the structure of the department. How many agents are there? How many client service people are there? Client service is kind of similar to my role in terms of just being the day-to-day for a player. Uh-huh. But my role is a little more strategic, but just taking into account and trying to project, okay, like this is how much work this is going to be. This is the value I bring. Having to dig through, doing my own research, hoping and attempting to have conversations with my network. I think especially now, like I said, one of my passion points is diverse women in sports. For those out there advocating for diversity in sports and diverse women in sports, please be more open to sharing things like your salary and your career trajectory. I'm speaking particularly of our white male colleagues in sports, male colleagues who possibly have been elevated at a faster pace or whatnot. There's a responsibility that comes with that. And if we're going to be out there kind of having these conversations of how we're going to make this better in this environment that we're in right now and in this change that we're all trying to make, we need to be more candid and we need to help each other out. I mentioned that because to the extent I could, I gathered as much information as I could in terms of compensation, but it's really not readily out there.
Right.
And when I say it would have been helpful to get these solid numbers from individuals who are already in that spot or in a similar position, or even colleagues in the sports industry who've been in the industry as long as I have, people just don't have these conversations.
Right.
And I think we're just still working towards having that transparency. But I think it's a small thing that we should all do as a sports community, is just, like I said, we can all kind of just talk the talk and talk about how we support women in sports and, women of color in sports, diverse women in sports. But if you're not offering little things like that or offering your advice, and it could be a confidential conversation, it could be a range conversation. I'm just saying, like, if you care about this is how you can help us most, is being really transparent about that sort of thing. How is this relevant, or what can I do personally to make that better, right? I'm accountable for the position I'm in. When I have conversations, I do the best I can. I've had particularly young Latino women reach out to me, like via social media, asking to have conversations over the phone about my career. To the extent I can, I do as many as I can. I do as many as I can at winter meetings, especially because, good Lord, it's intimidating there. And I told this young woman this last winter meeting, I'm like, first of all, the fact that you asked for this meeting and we're speaking, I commend you for that. Because when I was in your position and I was your age, this would be terrifying for me. So you're already showing me that you have the confidence and desire to be in my position, to be in this world. So I need to acknowledge that for you and let you know that please keep having this confidence in yourself. It will only help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, because thinking back, that helps you when you hear people say that to you. They reassure you and you're just like, you don't even think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly this young woman was thinking, oh my gosh, am I annoying her? Oh my gosh, it's winter meetings. Like, there's so much going on. But I have no problem being super transparent about how I got to this position or the Dodgers and, my journey. And I think the more that we all can do that, the better off we'll all be. And we'll be able to kind of get the industry to where it needs to be. And we're so far off. So we just all really need to, I need to acknowledge that. And we need to kind of put that in this conversation.
Yes, I agree. And by sharing, we empower each other with that knowledge, and going into the room for those negotiations on salary and title, it becomes a little easier. It's always a challenge to advocate for yourself and get your worth when you have power behind you, right? When you have that support behind you, telling you, I actually made this much. This is what you want to ask for. I mean, it goes a long way. By doing that, you give so much confidence to
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's such a small thing if you think about it. And, I understand the hesitancy, but like I said, if, in the time we're in and I see all these people speaking out and wanting to do better, and there's just really little things you could do. But that reassurance, like that confidence booster, I think in my personal negotiations, I want to say that the big confidence booster, I have to mention him. So Joel Wolf is one of the co-heads of baseball at Wasserman. Someone I so respect and has been really pivotal in terms of this role that I've been in a little over 3 years now. I'm like, wow, time flies. So we're winding a little bit to the negotiation jump off, if you will. Once that position had been approved, I do remember being at work and Joel Wolf, the co-head of baseball at Wasserman, he had a meeting, I think, with Andrew Friedman at the Dodgers. And he texted me, hey, it's Joel at Wasserman. I happen to be here early for this meeting. Definitely want to have a chat with you. I heard that you're considering working for our agency. If you have a few minutes, let me know. And I was like, Joel Wolf, like, yes, like, of course, right? Mm-hmm. So, we met out in the club level in those seats, had a conversation, but to kind of round out the theme of the right people will take notice of you. It's something that I want to keep going back to because careers are challenging. Yep. And sometimes you wonder if your sacrifices or your tough days, if it's worth sticking through. And I share this because it is, because the right people do notice at the end. They do. So Joel, we had this conversation and Joel said, I've been watching you work for years. Internally, I'm like, you've been watching me work for years? I'm like, really? Yeah, right. I'm like, pause. I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like, take a moment.
Yeah, I'm going to need a minute.
But I've been watching you work for years and your work is really impressive. I'm particularly impressed by the ability you have to interact and to manage players. I see that when you ask them to do something or an immediate interview, etc., they always do it. They're taking your advice. And he says, and it's in our business, that skill set, that ability to almost flawlessly connect with and communicate in an authentic, real way with players is very powerful. And he said, I just want to let you know that. So I hope that you basically decide to work with us. I think that you could be extremely valuable to us. In not so many words, but something like that. And after that, Jahaan, I felt more confidence than I could even have imagined going into the negotiation phase. Because I thought, not only has this position been approved, and not only to have the backing of Adam Katz and Andy Moda, Joel Wolf, who is one of the most well-known, successful agents, respected agents in the game for years, is telling me I have this skill set that's hard to find. That was it. I was like, I'm good. I'm going to make up for those years lost and move on. And it worked out. And I aimed high, Jahaan. I'll be real with you. The title I initially sought was vice president. Okay. Now, it's important for you to understand that I left the Dodgers as an assistant director. Now, in baseball, you can be sitting on a title forever. And it's quite discouraging. So in my calculations, I did feel that I earned that title. But to that point, I had not worked in the sports agency world. I knew I was shooting for the moon. But if you would have told me like years ago that I would have thrown it out there like that, I would have been like, no.
Yeah, no way.
Whatever title you want to give me, it's okay.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
But anyway, it ended up being senior director, which I still am now. And I'm working towards a feasible goal of attaining that title, which would be meaningful to me. Mm-hmm. For so many reasons. And I have the confidence that I will get there in a short period of time. I look forward to that day, but it's a long road to that one. Again, going back to the negotiation question, confidence question, once you feel like you have, and I keep going back to, earning your position or paying your dues. And I think it's an important point to drive home because in my experience recently, I feel like a lot of young people who get in sports, they're thinking that this thing is going to turn around year after year, that like promotions are back to back, that you intern for 1 year and then you deserve to be an agent, right? It doesn't work that way. And I think you got to reel it in and, really understand the concept of earning something. It's important. It's earning it.
I agree. So there's this, people come in, I'm in sports, I'm going to make it. Every year I'm going to get, like you said, I'm going to get a promotion, I'm going to get a raise, I'm going to just crush it. And that doesn't happen, right? That does not happen all the time. Where I see success with men is they are constantly doing exactly what you just described. They are out there networking and meeting everybody and shaking hands and kissing babies and getting to know people, right? And I'm not saying they're doing the wrong thing because it's what you did and it's the right thing. You pushed yourself and said, I'm just going to meet everybody I possibly can. I'm going to talk to everybody I possibly can because you had a goal in mind, right? You weren't out there asking people to go to church or get lunch. You were just going and talking shop and meeting people and trying to be helpful. And as a result, look where you are now. You created a position that did not exist. And I often talk about seeing people get these, I really often talk about men getting these invisible opportunities that we didn't know existed. Right. And the more time I spend researching all this stuff, they're doing stuff like that. They're out there talking and hustling and putting their name out there. And that's what we have to do. And I'm an introvert, but I had to push myself to do that. Otherwise I'd still be in Boston.
Yeah. I mean,
and not that there's anything wrong with still being in Boston. I have a lot of good friends that are out there, but my intent wasn't to stay. I wanted to move around. My goal was to move around from team to team because I liked the change.
Yeah. I think it's an important point too that you bring up in terms of there's nothing wrong with you if you were still in Boston. Listen, like if you feel that the organization or the company you work for is meeting your career goals, if you're being elevated at a pace that you feel is acceptable to you, if you feel like you're growing year in, year out, by all means, there's nothing wrong with being with an organization 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Like it doesn't happen very often, but that's fine too. The point of me saying I would have done things sooner or whatnot was the fact that you have to be very candid and honest with yourself in terms of if your personal goals are being met. Mm-hmm. Because there comes a point where sometimes, sadly, it doesn't necessarily work that way and you have to move on because there's no other way to do it. Yeah. And that's nothing wrong with that either.
Yes. It's all about timing. And I look at some of the women who were at the Red Sox when I was there, and nothing gives me more joy is when I see them or I hear about them getting a promotion. And now some of the women that I worked with, we were all, coordinators, managers, my boss's director at the time. Now she's a SVP or an EVP.
Yeah.
Someone who used to work for me, now she's a vice president. I'm like, the women of the Red Sox are crushing it. But I guarantee you when I interview them, and hopefully they all say yes, but when I interview them, I guarantee you it was their personal goal, right?
Right.
Where they wanted to be. And to your point, like you knew exactly where you wanted to be and you played the long game. I knew I liked to move around and solve problems. I like to come in, solve a problem, and then move on to something else, which is why I started business. But it's all about your being honest with yourself, being honest with yourself and telling yourself what you want and then going after it.
It never gets easy. I don't want to paint this illusion of like, okay, I got my dream job at Wasserman and it has been a smoothly paved road. No. And any step in your career, it's going to present all different challenges that, again, all these experiences you've had prior, they're going to help you better navigate. But please do not be mistaken. Working in the sports industry is tough and it is always going to be tough. And that's what makes it great. I mean, we wouldn't, have as much passion and thrill talking about this subject if it wasn't hard.
Yes.
The fact that I've been in baseball for 13 years, period.
Yes.
Is to me huge. Knowing you've worked in baseball, you're well apprised of how tough it is. Knowing every step, everything that happened leading up, I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep building on it. I just wanted to point that out. But I think we have to stay the course. Like I said, I think sports gets better when women like you or me reach those goals. I don't think we have the luxury to be like, oh, titles don't matter. They do. They really do. Because not only are they benchmarks, but thinking from a sort of bigger perspective, you want to be that person who, when you're meeting with that young Latino woman at winter meetings and on your card it says vice president or whatnot, or senior vice president, or so on and so forth. That to them also shows that, oh, wow. So someone like me is in these roles, has this role in baseball. It exists. And that's why it's important. That's why it's important to kind of stay the course and make sure you're, like we keep going back to evolving your goals, because it's not, to me, it's not just about us, you and me sitting here, our immediate circle. It's thinking about the young you and the young me and what would have been more helpful to us. Yes. And how we can kind of take accountability for who we are and where we are now and just have this direct effect, if we can, in any way possible, to just open these doors and make it feel like you belong, you're cool, you're good, you can do this.
Yes, you can sit with us for sure. You said it gets harder as you continue to move up, and it's so true. But what I try to tell my younger coaching clients is form the good habits now, because then it gets harder, but your confidence is bigger than it was when you first start. But you got to start the good habits now. For you, it's that educating yourself and networking, and then having that support from women in your life, right? You had 3 big ones. So it's like, whatever those things are, start those good habits now, because once it gets harder, you're going to be able to navigate it a lot easier with grace, if you will, and confidence, because you started the good habits younger in your career.
I feel like we talked about sort of adapting as you go along in your career, constantly learning. But also, I feel it's important to talk about everything that you uniquely bring to your job, to your career. Always keep that. When we say adapt, we're not saying become like every other person in your department. Bring who you authentically are and what brought you to that place and integrate it the best you can. And that's where it gets a little tricky, because when you go to a new job and anything you do, really, things are done a certain way. So when you propose doing things in a different way, it's going to most often met with some resistance. And
Yes.
that's okay. That's completely okay. The idea isn't to just adapt in the sense of change who you are for each job you are. No, it's find a way to successfully integrate what you bring to the table into your current position. And that's where the value comes. That's where you begin to turn heads again and things progress.
Let me end here and ask you this question. Since you are all about transparency, obviously the next step, or maybe it's not obvious, the next step for you is VP. How do you build that case for becoming a VP? You've been at Wasserman now for about 3.5 years, right?
Yes. If I'm being transparent and honest, for the purposes of this pod, and because we know each other so well, I am already in a spot where I have all the confidence, Jahaan, that I have already earned that title. So to me, it's kind of not making a case as much as it is making sure that these goals that I had have been met, and just presenting that in a manner that helps kind of sort of finally push the envelope and getting that approval for the title. And what's good about my agency is that in terms of my work experience, I don't think I've ever had as much clear direction in terms of like, okay, there's a very official, formal process that's enacted throughout the agency as it pertains to yearly reviews. So not only do you fill out a form and sort of kind of revisit where your growth, where you've perceived that your growth has happened, but your direct manager, in my case, it'd be the heads of baseball, they assess on their own where they think you fall. Yeah. And then you come together, you have a conversation. Every year, we're actually asked to submit formal goals. Like it is on paper. I've not had that process before. So this is really new to me. So in that sense, it makes it, I don't want to say a little easier, but it's a little bit more clear cut.
Yes.
It's now been kind of over a year that I've been really active in our Diversity and Inclusion Council, which I'm super proud of, because I know we've talked about several times throughout this conversation what my passion points are, which is diverse women in sports, increasing the number of diverse women in sports. And that was my way of taking an active role in my current environment to try to affect change. Uh-huh. As you can imagine, over the past couple months, the work in terms of diversity inclusion everywhere has increased. So it's been an interesting and welcome, I would say, opportunity to be more visible, because you have to understand this agency is enormous, right? While people will be familiar with what the baseball group does or the NBA group does or whatnot, like you won't automatically be like, oh yeah, I know Yvonne in baseball when you work in the Raleigh office or in New York or whatnot, wherever, the various practices are for Wasserman. Because it's not only talent representation, it's brand marketing and et cetera. So it's a huge just network of people. But through this important work, it's in a way given more visibility internally to women like myself. And I've currently been super inspired by my colleague, Lindsay, who's based in our Raleigh office, who's as tenured as me, but in the NFL, and she's in brand marketing.
Okay.
So she and I have collaborated on a couple occasions now, planning sort of internal educational sessions. She's spoken on several panels, and kind of it's been really cool and inspiring to see someone as tenured as herself, as a Black woman in sports, really have that visibility. And again, I say that's like important because going back to other women, younger people engaging and seeing on social media who these people are behind this work, it's important that she's out there. So that's been a huge thing, I think. And I feel like I alluded this in the beginning, and I feel like I could talk forever with you, but I'll try to wrap it up. This time, I feel like the past couple months has really challenged me to be, I guess, like more, not honest, but more open and honest to kind of shifting my focus or putting extra focus or finding time to really do work in the spaces that I feel are important to me, that I've mentioned before. This is in addition to my normal job. So it's almost like I've kind of volunteered to take this other role, but I do feel that this work is also important in terms of, when we're talking about sports leadership, it should be actually one of the top requirements, because I feel like any leadership position in our industry should have that, that passion and that care and that desire to try to affect change in the way they can. I think that should be where our leadership is going. And so I'll wrap with saying that my hope is that in the role that I hope to achieve or earn, at the agency pretty soon, that it will incorporate all these things, and I'm ready for that challenge. I'd welcome the opportunity to not only keep growing in what I do in baseball, managing players, etc., but to dedicate as much time as I've always wanted to dedicate in this space.
I love that. And I can't wait to see what you do next. I've watched your career, unfold over social media, LinkedIn and Instagram, and you're doing some amazing things. Your journey has been amazing. And I can only imagine what comes next for you. And so the one thing I want to ask is, and I'm sure women who are listening want to know, someone wanted to get in touch with you. How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, I'm pretty open and flexible. I would say the most, blind outreach that I'm most attentive to would be via Twitter or LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, I believe I have my Gmail address on there. Okay. So that's helpful. Those are probably the two best ways. I'm also on Instagram, but that's more of like a personal page. So I don't necessarily check DMs there, but I do have a Gmail listed on my LinkedIn profile. It's probably easy. And I check email regularly. And, I would encourage anyone particularly interested in any listings that they see on the Wasserman website. I'm always trying to help in recruitment there. As it pertains to, obviously diversity. I'm involved in the recruitment within the Diversity Council. So always looking to connect with young people who are in school, who are just starting out, even senior level individuals. I'm always happy to connect people with other people. I do that a lot. I'm sure you do too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Gmail on my LinkedIn or Twitter.
Awesome. Yvonne, this has been incredible. This has been
I feel like I kept talking and talking. So I want to thank you for having this podcast. I've listened. I have a couple of favorite episodes that you've posted. I follow the podcast. Everyone listening, follow the podcast, follow Jahaan on Instagram. There's always amazing content. And I think there needs to be more of this. I congratulate you for creating this space for women to just have conversations. And I just hope that on some level, something I said was helpful. And thank you.
Thank you for saying that. And yes, this is an incredible episode. And I think people will get a ton from this. So I can't wait to hear feedback from everybody. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening. I would love to stay connected with you. You can follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how I can support you in your journey in the sports industry, email me at jblake@thejblakegroup.com or send me a DM on Instagram. I look forward to hearing from you.